The rancher needed a wife by Sunday or lose everything. She needed to disappear forever.
I need a wife by Sunday. You need to disappear. We can help each other.
The stagecoach rolled into Dusty Creek on a Thursday afternoon when the summer heat pressed down on everything. Like a heavy blanket, Margaret Ellis stepped off with nothing but a worn carpet bag and 17 cents in her pocket. The town stretched before her with its wooden buildings and dirt roads, looking like every other small town she had passed through in the last 3 weeks. But this one felt different. This one felt like the end of the road. She had left everything behind in Missouri. The scandal that destroyed her reputation had not been her fault, but that hardly mattered when the whole town believed otherwise. Her former employer had accused her of stealing silver candlesticks from his home. The truth was that his own son had taken them to pay gambling debts, but a poor governess had no voice against a wealthy family. Margaret had been dismissed without references, her name dragged through gossip circles, until no respectable family would hire her. So she had used her last savings to travel west, hoping that distance might offer what her hometown could not. A fresh beginning, a chance to prove her worth once more. Margaret walked toward the general store, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. She needed to find work quickly. Perhaps someone needed a seamstress or a cook, or even someone to clean houses. She would do anything honest to earn her keep. The general store smelled of coffee beans and leather when she stepped inside. An elderly woman stood behind the counter, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up with curious but kind eyes. Margaret cleared her throat. "I apologize for the interruption. I have just arrived in town, and I am seeking employment. Do you know of anyone who might need help?" The woman studied her for a long moment. "What kind of work can you do?" "I was a governess for 6 years. I can teach reading and writing and arithmetic. I can cook and sew and manage a household. I am willing to learn anything else that might be required." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "A governess, you say? Well now, that is interesting timing indeed." She leaned forward on the counter. "There is a rancher outside of town. Name is Samuel Harding. He has been looking for someone to help with his boys for months now. Nobody wants to take the position because the ranch is isolated and the work is hard, but those children need someone terrible bad." Margaret felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time in weeks. "How might I find this ranch?" The woman gave her directions and warned her that it was a 3-mile walk. Margaret thanked her and set off immediately, unwilling to let this opportunity slip away. The Harding Ranch appeared as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. It was a large property, with a sturdy wooden house and a big red barn. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and chickens pecked at the ground near the front porch. Everything looked well maintained, but somehow incomplete, like a painting missing its final brushstrokes. Margaret smoothed her dress and walked up to the front door. She knocked 3 times and waited. The door swung open to reveal a man in his middle 30s with broad shoulders and tired eyes. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. Behind him, Margaret could hear the sounds of children arguing and something clattering to the floor. "Whatever you are selling, we do not need it." His voice was gruff but not unkind. "I am not selling anything, sir. I heard you were looking for someone to help with your sons. I am a trained governess with 6 years of experience." His expression changed from dismissal to interest. He looked at her carpet bag and her travel-worn appearance. "You came all the way out here, looking for work. I arrived in Dusty Creek today. The woman at the general store told me about your situation." A crash came from inside the house, followed by a child's wail. The man closed his eyes briefly, and Margaret saw exhaustion etched into every line of his face. When he opened his eyes again, there was something desperate in them. "Come inside," he said. "We should talk." The interior of the house confirmed what Margaret had suspected from outside. It was clean enough but chaotic. Toys scattered across the floor, dishes piled in the sink. 3 boys of varying ages stood in the parlor, the youngest one crying, while the middle one held a broken wooden horse. Samuel Harding introduced his sons. The oldest was Thomas, age 10, a serious boy with his father's dark hair. The middle child was William, age 7, mischievous and energetic. The youngest was baby James, age 4, still sniffling from whatever tragedy had just occurred. Their mother passed 2 years ago, Samuel explained quietly, while the boys examined the newcomer with curious eyes. "I have tried to manage everything myself, the ranch and the house and the children, but I am failing them. They need more than I can give, while also keeping this place running." Margaret knelt down to meet James at eye level. She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and gently wiped his tears. "What happened to your horse?" she asked softly. "William broke it," James said with a trembling lip. "It was an accident," William protested. Margaret looked at the wooden horse in William's hands. The leg had snapped off cleanly. "This can be fixed," she said. "A little glue and careful hands, and it will be good as new, perhaps even stronger than before." James stopped crying. His eyes grew wide with hope. "Really, really, broken things can almost always be mended if someone cares enough to try." She stood and turned to find Samuel watching her with an unreadable expression on his face. He led her to the kitchen where they could talk privately, while the boys stayed in the parlor. He poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her at the worn wooden table. "I need to be honest with you," he said. "I have had 3 women come out here to interview for this position. None of them stayed more than a week. The work is hard. The nearest neighbors are miles away, and my boys can be challenging. They are good children at heart, but they are hurting, and they do not always know how to show it properly." Margaret wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "May I be honest with you as well?" He nodded. She told him everything: the false accusation, the ruined reputation, the journey west with nothing but hope and determination. When she finished, she met his eyes directly. "I cannot provide references from my previous employer because he is the one who wronged me. I can only offer you my word that I am honest and hard-working, and that I would treat your sons as if they were my own family." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. The setting sun cast golden light through the window, illuminating dust motes floating in the air between them. "I have a proposal," he said finally. "It might sound strange, but hear me out before you respond." Margaret waited. These boys need more than a governess. They need stability. They need someone who will stay. Every time someone leaves, it breaks their hearts a little more. He paused, gathering his words carefully. "I am not looking for love. I do not have time for courtship and romance. But I am looking for a partner, someone to share the responsibility of raising these children and running this household. Are you asking me to marry you?" Margaret could barely believe the words coming from her own mouth. "I am asking you to consider a partnership. You need shelter and employment, and a chance to rebuild your life. I need someone to mother my sons and make this house a home again. We could help each other." The proposal was unconventional, but not unreasonable. Margaret thought about her 17 cents. She thought about the scandal following her like a shadow. She thought about 3 little boys who had lost their mother and a man who was drowning in responsibility. She also thought about the way James had stopped crying and she showed him kindness. The way William had looked ashamed, about the broken horse, the way Thomas had watched her with hope hidden behind his serious expression. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them. I will be treated as an equal partner in this household. My opinions regarding the children will be respected, and if either of us wishes to end this arrangement, we will discuss it honestly and fairly." Samuel extended his hand across the table. "Agreed." Margaret shook his hand and felt something shift in the universe. She had come to Dusty Creek looking for work and had found something far more significant. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church in town. The boys stood beside their father, cleaned and combed and wearing their best clothes. Margaret wore a simple blue dress she had altered herself, using fabric from the general store. The ceremony was brief and practical, witnessed by the store owner and the local blacksmith. That night, Margaret took the spare bedroom and began the slow work of building a family. The first weeks were challenging. Thomas tested her authority constantly. William seemed determined to cause as much chaos as possible. James clung to her skirts and cried whenever she left the room. Samuel worked from dawn until dark, coming home exhausted and quiet. But gradually, things began to change. Margaret established routines. Breakfast at 7, lessons until noon, chores in the afternoon, stories before bed. She mended clothes and cooked meals and helped with homework. She listened when the boys needed to talk and gave them space when they needed solitude. One evening, Thomas came to her with a book he had been struggling to read. She sat beside him on the porch and guided him through the difficult words, praising his progress and encouraging his efforts. When they finished the chapter, he looked at her with something new in his eyes. "Mother used to read with me like this," he said quietly. Margaret's heart ached with tenderness. "Would you like to tell me about her?" Thomas talked for an hour while the stars emerged overhead. He told her about his mother's laugh and her apple pie and the songs she used to sing. Margaret listened to every word and did not try to replace those memories. She simply added new ones alongside them. Samuel found him on the porch as the moon rose high. He stood in the doorway and watched his son smile for the first time in months. When Thomas finally went to bed, Samuel sat in the chair beside Margaret. "Thank you," he said simply. "You do not need to thank me. They are my sons now, too." He looked at her in the moonlight, and something warm flickered in his tired eyes. Something that felt like the beginning of real affection. Months passed and seasons changed. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. The boys grew stronger and happier. James stopped crying so often. William channeled his energy into helping with the animals. Thomas became a responsible young man who took pride in his studies. And somewhere between the shared meals and quiet conversations and long days of working side by side, Margaret and Samuel discovered that partnership could grow into something deeper, Respect became friendship. Friendship became trust. Trust became love. On their first anniversary, Samuel presented Margaret with a small gold ring. The first ring had been practical, purchased quickly for the ceremony. This one was chosen with care, a symbol of the genuine bond they had built. "I did not expect to love again," he confessed. "I thought that part of my life was finished." Margaret slipped the ring onto her finger. "I did not expect to find a family. I thought I would spend my life alone, working in other people's homes and raising other people's children. These children are yours," he said firmly. "This home is yours. This life is yours. Everything I have is yours." She kissed him softly as their sons watched from the window and cheered with delight. The scandal in Missouri became a distant memory. The wealthy family that had wronged her held no power over her new life. Margaret had found more than shelter and employment in Dusty Creek. She had found purpose and belonging in love. Years later, when people asked how she and Samuel had met, Margaret would smile and tell them the truth. "He needed a mother for his sons. I needed a second chance. We made a deal that changed everything, and then we fell in love."